I believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. It's not for everyone at all times, but I think it's a really valuable skill for everyone to cultivate because there might be a season of your life where it makes sense to be self-employed or to be like you, the owner of a scalable company. And I think we all need to expose ourselves to opportunities to learn about it because you never know when it will come in handy. And what I've seen is that there are a lot of people out there with talent for it that have no idea. Maybe they had parents that thought not having a traditional job is unsafe, economically risky, and they won't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I think we all need to rethink that a little bit in this current environment where so much is changing. It's very, very empowering for all to pick up that skill, whether we use it or not right now.
Hello, and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of human ingenuity, clever, inventive, and original thinking. My name is Ken Tenser, curator of Say Hi to the Future and CEO of Spiderworks, a leading business consultancy for mid-market organizations and entrepreneurs globally. With me today is Elaine Pofeldt, an independent journalist who specializes in small business, entrepreneurship, and careers. She's the author of the $1 Million One-Person Business, a look at how entrepreneurs are hitting seven-figure revenue in businesses where they are the only employees. And she's writing a new book, Tiny Business, Big Money. Her work has appeared in Fortune, Money, CNBC, Inc., Forbes, Crain's New York Business, and many other publications, as she has contributed to The Economist Intelligence Unit. As a senior editor at Fortune Small Business, where she worked for 8 years, Elaine was twice nominated for the National Magazine Award for her features and ran the magazine's annual business plan competition. Elaine graduated from Yale University with a BA in English. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Okay, well, welcome, Elaine. Thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks so much, Ken. It's wonderful to be here.
You know, it's a little bit of a flip of a switch, if you will. I mean, you've interviewed me many times for things I've done, and now in the last 2-3 years, you've gone from not just being an incredible journalist about business, but to writing a book that really caught the imagination of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs.
Well, it's interesting to have the tables turned. I think I'm more comfortable asking the questions, but it's always so much fun to talk with you, Ken. I'm really thrilled to be here.
So what have you seen? I mean, you've been writing about business, about entrepreneurship for many years, and we've just come out of a special period, we'll call that, and we're still obviously not quite out of the woods by any stretch. But what do you see with small businesses, with entrepreneurs? Are they optimistic again? Are they just hanging in? Like, what's the mood?
Well, I think it's very interesting. Some of the people in existing businesses whose business model no longer works as well in the pandemic are not optimistic. Yet at the same time, we see record numbers of people starting new businesses. So I think what's happening is a bit of creative destruction, where some of the old opportunities are fading out, but there are a lot of new opportunities. And I think after all the months of reflection that we had, whether voluntarily or not, people have really rethought their relationship with work, and entrepreneurship is looking very exciting to people. I think we're finding some employers have been very sensitive to employees and what they're experiencing outside of work. Others really haven't risen to the occasion. And I think what's happened is if they haven't, they're seeing difficulty hiring people. They're seeing people leaving, and they're not at the top of their game. They're really not going to be competitive in this new environment. And what's happening is some of those employees, especially younger employees and women, are flocking to entrepreneurship. In fact, I'm just about to post a story on Forbes about MBO Partners did their State of the Independent Workforce. They did a data brief. And that's what they found, that the younger the generation, the more likely they are to start a business. and women, because of all the challenges of online schooling and unstable school schedules, were stretched very thin. And they're saying, you know what, this entrepreneurship thing looks pretty good. And what I think is really interesting is it's become much easier to scale now than ever
Right.
before. Like I know you're a big champion of scaling up in Canada and in the US and beyond. And once people get these businesses going, there's no telling how big they'll grow. Some people will choose to keep them very small. And I write a lot about the micro business. Some people will build them like traditional startups, and some will build them into scale ups. And what I think we're going to see is a lot more diversity and inclusion, because a lot of people who might not have considered entrepreneurship without all the reflection of the COVID-19 pandemic are now giving it a whirl, and they're finding out they're good at it, and they're
Yeah.
picking up the skills they need to grow it. And I think we also see a lot of the supporters and champions of entrepreneurship stepping in, providing grants, because we value the small business sector and don't want it to close. So all those things coming together, I think we're going to look at this as a very, very important period for entrepreneurship.
Well, no, I agree completely. And I think one of the things when you talk about importance of entrepreneurship, I think that, one of the things you touched on was work-life balance in the sense of being a micro business, or I'll say in choosing the size that you would like to grow your business to. We don't always have that choice, but I think that, as an entrepreneur, as a serial entrepreneur, I think I've realized over the years, it took me a while, that one, you have to have a passion and a love for what you're doing. And two, you have to understand the size that you would like to go to, the size that you're comfortable to, because, and I think it was Bo Burlingham who wrote, I think it was Small Giants, if I'm
Oh,
remembering the name
yeah,
right.
yeah, he's a great writer.
Yeah, and it was a brilliant book, and it really touched me because it didn't say that you have to be a big business to be a brilliant business. You just have to be a brilliant business. And I think that entrepreneurs today, whether they're solopreneurs or want to scale to mid to large, I think they have to look at themselves in the mirror and understand what that means for their life, for their family life. And I think that possibly the pandemic has made us step back and say, hey, we have to scale within a comfort zone, if you will.
I think you're right about that. I also think each business has a natural size, but we don't always know what that size is until we're in the thick of running it. Some people will realize what I started really doesn't have the potential to go beyond one or two people. And then other people say, hey, you know what, this could go to 20 people, or this could take over the world like Amazon, right? And
Right.
world. And you just don't know that unless you get into the ring. I always tell that to my kids. We all enjoy martial arts, and just getting into the ring teaches you so much that you will never learn unless you try it. And part of that is your own tolerance for growth, or your own desire
Right.
for growth. And then each thing that you move in the business affects your personal life. It's like a lever. So you might find your family life is great when you're at 20 employees, but when you're at 50, not so great. You're kind of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul when it comes to time,
Yeah.
or your stress level is too high. And you might not know that until you try, but there's really no harm in trying to build. And then you can always sell off part of the business. There's a lot of things you can do. And my belief about business has always been, if you build a great or a brilliant business, as Bo Burlingham would say, then you have options, right? If you run, that's why I wrote the $1 Million One Person Business, because I think the people running those businesses are very good operators of their businesses, and that gives them options. Some chose the option of having a great boutique business. Others did become conventional scale ups. When I updated the book
Mhm.
earlier this year, it came out again. And then others, they did go the traditional scale up route, but that was because they laid the foundation in the beginning of first of all, a decent amount of revenue, which you have to have in order to have a decent amount of profit. and they did have profits, which is important too. Um, so it is very interesting. I think they're all connected, right? And we're all part of an ecosystem. I know you're a big, I see your LinkedIn posts a lot and the writing that you do. You're a big proponent of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We
Yes.
all have our role in it, and it's not always clear what that is until we try things.
No, absolutely. And again, it's good to know who you are and what it is you want to do. And when you get to those decision points about how large you want your business to be, I think to learn, how to balance the interpersonal, the personal, the family, the hobbies that we all seem to lose if we scale too quickly. So a little bit more though about the $1 million one person business. You wrote that just before the pandemic, give or take, about a year or so before that happened. Um, are there things you look back on now and go, yeah, those are even more applicable, or boy, it's going to be even that much harder today to be a one person business?
I actually think it's easier because one thing that has happened, it really happened in 2018, which was that Amazon allowed operators to own more than one Amazon store. So now you have this exit opportunity. I didn't only write about e-commerce entrepreneurs in the book, but that was one of the 6 main categories of
Right.
business. And what happens is when these businesses start getting bigger, you have a lot of investors with money. They have nowhere to park right now. They're looking for high returns. And a lot of times one person businesses are quite profitable because it's one very efficient person doing all the work, plus automation, plus outsourcing, and things that are not payroll costs, basically. And so they're buying them up and aggregating them into little stables of e-commerce businesses. So I think it's actually gotten a lot easier. It's more competitive in a way because people are realizing this opportunity. But it's very exciting for the one-person businesses. I also think in terms of ease, one of the things that's very difficult for a lot of people is this post-COVID environment. It's not even post-COVID, it's like the Delta variant environment where when you work for a company, if the company is saying you have to come back into the office, there are a lot of protocols where it can be done safely, but maybe the worker doesn't agree with exactly how the company is doing it, or they have problems with the building that the work is being done in. Maybe the company is good, but like going up in the elevator is really treacherous for them and they're worried. They're really making a decision in a lot of cases in their mind about, is this worth risking my life for?
Right.
That really raises the stakes for a job. So when you may feel like you're risking your life to go into the office, then in a way, choosing entrepreneurship becomes easier if you prefer to be at home, or if you need to, like a lot of the working parents, because your schools, you never really know if the school is going to shut down. You keep getting these COVID notices. I have 4 kids and I'm always prepared for a shutdown. I couldn't really be in New York City every day because of that. So for me, it's a
Right.
no-brainer to have my own business. Even though my kids are ages 11 to 17, they're a little older. And think about the people with younger children. They can't just leave the kids in a hot car if the employer says, you have to come in. It's for our culture. You must be here. We can't sacrifice that. So it has become easier. Also, there's a lot of resources that make it a lot easier for newbies to start a business, like the platforms like Upwork, People Per Hour, Freelancer. There's a lot of industry specific ones where if you're really not confident about starting a business, now sometimes those platforms are not the highest paying, like even Uber to some extent. But it allows you to get right into it quickly and learn a lot about business. I actually wrote a story for CNBC about how Uber was a great training ground for entrepreneurs to do other things, because what's the first lesson you learn is the importance of profitability, right? If it costs too much to keep the car on the road, then driving for Uber or Lyft or one of the other ones isn't worth it. So you have to figure out how can you do that in a way where it is efficient. Maybe you drive only at the airport because those rides are more profitable. But people learn very valuable lessons from these platform type businesses. And then they also learn how to think like an entrepreneur, right? Which is to really think about profit and think about how to maximize their time and think about whether certain work is worth it or not from a bigger picture. Like, will this grow the business? Does it move it forward? Or does it keep me just on a treadmill? Which is something you don't get an opportunity to do very often as an employee. I mean, think of how many times all of us have probably been an employee at some point. You're sitting in a meeting and somebody's filibustering, and the meeting should have been 30 minutes. And the person running the meeting isn't in control completely. And now all of a sudden it's 2.5 hours later, and you didn't get your work done. And now it's lunchtime, right?
Right,
And you
right.
can't walk out. You're obligated to stay in that meeting. When you're an entrepreneur, you can opt out. You can just say, so sorry, I have another call in 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying is, I mean, entrepreneurism, it really teaches you about scarcity, scarcity of time, scarcity of money, um, scarcity of energy,
Yes.
as well as, especially for some of us who might have been entrepreneurs for over 30 years now. The energy sort of kicks in is one of those factors. But as you're talking though about entrepreneurship, and it's easier to get on, like the on ramp to become an entrepreneur is easier or more available today. In some ways, I think that's a good thing, because I think people have an opportunity to take their shot to do what they believe is different or better within their own business model. The other thing I sort of worry about, though, is how many people are becoming entrepreneurs, and not by choice, but by need through the pandemic and well, I'll say it because of plutocracy, because people need extra jobs, extra income. I mean, so there's a positive side to it, but there's also truly a negative where people are being forced, I believe, into an uncomfortable position.
I think that's true, but I think it's causing a societal reckoning because employers are feeling a lot of pain when they're creating conditions where somebody just cannot do the job because of maybe insensitivity to the situation of parents with the schools, and then they can't fill positions, and then they can't grow the company. They're realizing, well, hey, wait a minute, being really heavy-handed about this or being very arbitrary or not being flexible and customizing and recognizing that people in society have different levels of power and not recognizing what people's home situations are like, and that maybe somebody has a spouse that talks a good game but really isn't helping out much. and that becomes the employer's problem if they refuse to acknowledge that, or they refuse to acknowledge that people might have to go for 2 hours on the subway and they really don't want to get to work because they're
Right.
afraid they're going to get COVID. Maybe they're in one of the high risk groups and they're at even more risk, and now they're going to just quit and they'd rather just fend for themselves. It is a shame that they're being forced, but I think what's going to happen is the employers are going to do some deep thinking and say, wait a minute, this is a contract between us and the employees, and it has to be mutually beneficial. So in a way, it's a short-term pain and it can be bad, but it also gives the employees a bargaining power that they never had before. If like, okay, I got forced into entrepreneurship, I don't really wish to do it long-term. But if I'm ever in a situation at work where it's literally so stressful, it's making me sick, trying to deal with all these competing demands in my life, I don't have to stay. I could go drive for Uber. And I don't want to do it forever, but I can do it until I find an employer who does get it. And there are a lot of employers who do, I think,
Yeah.
too. I think we're seeing there are some really great ones, and they've been unbelievable with the benefits that they're offering, tailoring their benefits to what workers' needs are. They are customizing. They are thinking about how to make sure that the remote workers are included. They're doing a lot to really be there for the employees. I think those folks will have an advantage, and the other employers are going to have to catch up, or they're going to lose out and they're going to close. Basically, they're not going to have enough
Yeah.
people to really do more than just tread water.
Yeah.
Might
And when
take
I
a while,
look at,
right?
yeah, when you talk, when you talk about that, I think back to a book by Reid Hoffman, who one of the or the founder of LinkedIn, and I'm going by memory, I believe it was the Alliance, and he
Oh, I
talked
read
a lot.
that.
Sorry.
I read that book. That's a really interesting book, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and he talked a lot about the employee contract, if you will, rather than, you come on board and you become an employee and we review you every year. It's what is it that you want to achieve in the next 1 to 2 years? What does the company need you to achieve? How will you do it? And it's that discussion. It's a focused contract. And after that, it's not that you won't be part of LinkedIn. It's that you revisit. Would you like to stay in this type of role? Would you like to renew this contract? Is there something else you'd like to look at? And I'm guessing it was about 5 or 6 years ago, but it really opened my eyes to what I saw as a completely different narrative between employer and employee.
It's a very interesting idea. I have mixed feelings about it because I think it could disadvantage certain employees. Like, just say during that 2 years, a woman is pregnant and she takes maternity leave, right? Does that kind of count against her because she has been out a certain portion of the time, and maybe her metrics, of achievement during the time she was out wouldn't be the same as somebody who was there the whole time? So I sort of wondered if it might work against certain groups of workers. But it is interesting. It's almost like a freelancer where basically every relationship, it's almost like you're starting from scratch, and the clients won't use you again. If that experience is bad, they're not going to come back to you. So you always have to deliver your A game. And sometimes that works against you. Like you've got the flu or something and something is due and you just can't bring your A game that day. And somebody might hold it against you and not be tremendously compassionate about it, or not even want to hear it, because they outsource it to you to get it done. And that's where there probably could be more worker protections for freelancers. But but it also does put the onus on the worker to really deliver results and to serve the employer well. And I think that's why you find the really high performing workers a lot of times do start their own business, because they are pretty consistent about delivering good results, and they know they'll make a lot more than in a salary job that has the salary bands that go with each title. For somebody who just is more of a work to live type of person, like their whole life is mostly outside of work and they really wish they didn't have to have a job, they'd be happy on the universal basic income to do their artwork or mountain climbing or whatever. They might actually be better off in a traditional job than a contract situation, because maybe they want to give it not 100% of their passion and energy. They prefer to just come, have somebody tell them what to do what is asked of them, but no more, not really give a lot of discretionary effort, because their discretionary effort goes into other things, which could be very worthy. It could be volunteer work. It could be their family. It could be a lot of other things. But they're probably better off in a traditional job than where they eat what they kill, basically.
Well, no, and that's important to know too. And I give that talk to a lot of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs. And I remember, I think it was in my first book, The 90% Rule, where I interviewed somebody who came in and she had a growing business and wanted to keep it growing, but gave me a list of 2 or 3 things that she didn't want to do. Didn't want to travel, didn't want to do this, didn't want to do that. And she said, what's your advice? And I said to her, I think you should go home, have a nap, sell your business and get a job. And I wasn't being glib, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, the thing that I've learned is I can work any 7 days of the week I want, but I will be working each one of them. So I think that that's critical, whether you're one person, you're looking to scale, or you're a serial entrepreneur. Understand that, boy, yeah, you're satisfying your customers, and if people are tired or sick or not quite able to keep up, you have to.
That's so true. I think there's a happy medium. I think with some of the $1 million one-person businesses, they really don't work that many hours. They're really students of optimization and leveraging their output. And they're very big students of apps and technologies to get things done. They're big believers in outsourcing. They don't mind paying somebody to do certain things so that they actually have time. An example would be Laszlo Nadler, who's in the opening chapter of the book. I just reconnected with him, and he has Daddy-Daughter Day on Fridays. and you can't schedule any time with him on Fridays, right? He protects that, and he's got a very busy business, but he's also a big student of, keeping his Gmail inbox clean. He has an app. He has it all. It's not an app, but it's set up so that it automatically pulls out junk email, and he's very into efficiency. And so you can actually reduce the amount of time that you work. You could also, now that everybody's so acclimatized to Zoom, it's not such a big deal to tell a client that you really don't want to get on a plane right now. Let's do it by Zoom. I've been on all day
Yeah.
Zoom calls since the pandemic, which I don't prefer, but we've done it. Probably, everybody's been on something like half a day or all day. And it can be done. You can actually build a pretty close relationship with people. It's a little different if you break bread with them or go cycling with them or whatever it is, but there's also the health considerations in whatever part of the world you live in. I mean, some places are under complete lockdown still, other places
Right.
it's pretty much home free for the moment. And I think people are much more sensitive to the fact that maybe there are a lot of people that don't want to travel right now. So there might be a way, but to your point, it is a lot more work than being an employee. It really is. It never really leaves you. It's always in the back of your mind. You really have to consciously carve out time where you have unpressured time for the other things in your life, and that you're not always letting the business trump everything else. It's a big occupational hazard, but it's a matter of passion. It's what, where do your passions lie in life? For some people, it is in building a business. There's no shame in not feeling that way and feeling like my passion is my family, or my passion is the sport that I do, or my
Right.
community, or any number of other things that you could love in life.
Well, I'm talking to Elaine Pofeldt, who's a independent journalist. You've written for so many different magazines, Fortune, Money, CNBC, Forbes, and you're about to become a two-time author. The first one, The $1 Million One-Person Business, and now you're going to be releasing Tiny Business, Big Money. And you just mentioned a word, passion. I think that we say hi to the future, looking at human ingenuity, clever, inventive, original thinking. There's two things that I believe that everybody has to bring to the show or to one of our conferences, and that's passion and a savage curiosity. And it doesn't have to be for business. It can be for the arts. It can be for changing the world. It really, I just think it's a show about people who actually care very deeply about a very specific area. So you've been working with small businesses for so long and entrepreneurs. What's kept that fresh for you, and what's led now to the second book in just a few years?
Well, I think what's kept it fresh is I love being around independent thinkers. And I find entrepreneurs are probably the most independent thinkers on the planet. They're often the people that maybe they didn't get along with their teacher in school at certain times, but or other figures of authority. But they really think for themselves. And I think there's nothing more important right now. There's so much misinformation out there on every front. And I try to tell my kids this every day, that we all have a survival instinct that guides us. It's built into us. And if you listen to what you really feel and find things out for yourself, it creates a lot of opportunity in life, and it allows you to enjoy life no matter what's going on. And we've all been through a lot
Yeah, we have.
last 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
It really, I just love the way that they think. They're very much like artists. Basically all types of creative people, I think, have a lot in common with entrepreneurs. It's just the medium is different, right? The medium is a
Yes.
business as opposed to a piece of clay, or music on a guitar, or whatever the media might be. And so this book kind of came out of the other book, in that my thinking about what a one-person business is has evolved a little bit. In the first book, any business that was a non-employer business, I thought about as being under the same umbrella, whether they had 50 contractors or no contractors at all. Then I started to feel like the people that have a group of recurring contractors are very similar to people that have a recurring group of employees. It might just be that maybe the contractors serve other clients. They have their own business too, but if you have team meetings every Monday, you need people to follow certain systems. It's a little different than someone like, a freelance writer who has a bookkeeper and an accountant, but they don't
Right.
meet there's no management of people
Yeah.
involved. And I think one of the trickiest things for people is making that transition from being the free spirited, totally one person business to the person that has to tell other people what they need done and make sure that they do it. I just find that this is a common frustration for people. They don't have that skill. They don't necessarily like it. Some people really develop it as a leader. But how do you do that and still maintain your independent lifestyle and all the fun parts of entrepreneurship, like being able to go to the gym whatever time of the day you want to, as long as you don't have a client meeting, and only, going outside when it's sunny, not being stuck in a conference room if you want to, and just the little pleasures of life. And it was very interesting for me. I think the total number that I interviewed was over 60 entrepreneurs, and they're all in either businesses that have started hiring their first employees or have an extended team of contractors.
Right.
Uh, and what I did was I looked at census data on every NACIS code, that's the industry codes, what they're called
Right.
in the US, in America, and sorted them based on average revenue and average payroll. And then I subtracted the average payroll to see which ones had the most money left over. And the reason I did that for folks that might be new to business is payroll is often the biggest expense in a business. It's also a big barrier to entry for people because sometimes that's where people need financing, right? If you're going to scale up and you need 20 people, it's a factor, right? You might have to get a bank loan or you need to bring in outside funding. So it's sort of a relevant thing for people to know. And it was really, really interesting to see which ones came out on top. A lot of them were millionaire next door type businesses like these. I think everybody lives somewhere where you drive down this sort of post road, or like a sort of ugly road filled with strip malls and warehousey looking buildings that you never really notice what they are. And a lot of these businesses are actually quite lucrative. Based on my rough proxy, I also included information on where to find the average profit for each industry because you run substantial sized businesses. That's not exactly the profit, right? When you
Right.
track
Right.
payroll, you could have high energy costs in manufacturing. You could have high legal costs in certain industries or protecting your intellectual property. There's a lot of other costs, but this was a very, very blunt instrument, but I thought it was very interesting. And I just found out some really interesting things. And I sorted it by up to 5 employees, 5 to 9 employees, and 10 to 19 employees. So people who really don't have the budget to build a business with 10 to 19 employees right now, they can look at the list of under 5 employees and get some ideas. And it includes up to, I think it's up to 200 in each category of these industries that you could get into. In the under 5 employees, the first one was casinos, actually, which is really interesting. I'm not recommending that in the book for obvious reasons, but they're fun, but it's not something the average person is going to start. And some people have objections to gambling. But the second one was butter creameries.
Wow.
Right? Which is really interesting. And then I researched it a little bit and I wondered, there really aren't that many either. They seem to be immensely profitable. And I found this website of, I think it was called the Butter Institute. And they said, we are the Butter Institute. And it was something like 29 companies that control 90% of the butter market in America. So I thought these people have really good little businesses. And I spoke to Dana Derricks, who's one of the entrepreneurs in the book, who lives in Wisconsin and he has a goat farm. And I said, Dana, what is it with these dairy farms, the butter creameries? He said, oh, they're totally automated. They have almost no employees. So that, it's not something anybody could start, but it's something where maybe you work in the farming industry that might be relevant to you. There were a lot of wholesale businesses, which was interesting because sometimes you don't even really own the inventory. It's more like a financial type trading, with these types of products. And then there were manufacturers. I wrote about manufacturers in the first business. You can now really be a one-person business that's a manufacturer because you can outsource everything in the process, like from creating the prototype to making it, to selling it, to warehousing it. There were one of the fellows in the book, he makes the voice boxes for the bears in Build-A-Bear Workshop, right? And he's got this, I think it was like a $4 million business. And currently he actually has no employees. He has a few contractors and he's in his 60s. And it's a great little business. And who would have
Yeah, it
ever
sounds,
thought?
no, it's great. Look, I think what you're describing and what's important is that there's a lot of different ways to look for potential businesses. And two, I mean, you look at the Hollywood model and how they build films and how they scale up. And I think that's what we're hearing. So I want to thank you so much for your time this morning, Elaine. And just leave us with one thought. If somebody engages, with your platform, reads your books or listens to you, what do they walk away with? What's that one tidbit that you want to leave somebody with when they've read one of your books?
I believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. It's not for everyone at all times, but I think it's a really valuable skill for everyone to cultivate because there might be a season of your life where it makes sense to be self-employed or to be like you, the owner of a scalable company. And I think we all need to expose ourselves to opportunities to learn about it because you never know when it will come in handy. And what I've seen is that there are a lot of people out there with talent for it that have no idea. Maybe they had parents that thought not having a traditional job is unsafe, economically risky, and they won't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I think we all need to rethink that a little bit in this current environment where so much is changing. It's very, very empowering for all to pick up that skill, whether we use it or not right now.
No, I think that's great. We deal with ambiguity every day. We've learned more and more about it in the last few years. So again, Elaine, thank you so much for being part of the show and for allowing me to turn the tables and interview you for this broadcast.
It's always so much fun to talk with you, Ken. So nice to reconnect.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.